And our copy of this. Yes. It's different. All the titles are
Feel bad for them.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of trouble to do, right? You gotta figure that out. Yeah, well.
I'm right next to the doors.
Coming soon and the other
These are the things that we're talking about today.
I'm just waiting for my daughter-in-law.
I really enjoyed it.
How are you? Yes, of course.
Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Where did Jenna go?
You should start the recording.
I started a few minutes ago.
You know where to find me. Yeah, we should get though, if we're going to schedule, we should get. Sorry,
No, it's working.
So I'll just give everyone a moment to get seated and then we'll start.
Yeah, I talk loudly without the mic, right? We won't hear you on the Zoom.
Zoom. So I just want to say good afternoon and welcome to another edition of You've Got to Read This. This is our first time doing it in the fall. My name is Jennifer. Today I'm joined by the library director, you know her, Janine West, Katie Bezaire, Mearaid Stevenson, and Maria Ressina. We have a great list of books lined up for you today. Hopefully there'll be something that you'll be interested in and will move you to pick up and read. But because we have quite a long list of books to go through, I'm going to start, although Maria, you wanted, before Maria gets upset with me, I just want to take a moment and thank one of our sponsors. It's the boutique across the street called Les Flowers, who generously donated some flowers for the event today. So they're the bouquet on the table. So I just want to give a shout out to them. And Maria wanted me to remind everyone that there's a program on Tuesday.
From the Jewish Public Library. Okay, they are bringing the Rosenberg Elon, which is a scroll that they will be showing and talking about where it comes from. It's in honor of Jewish Book Month, so please come next week, 2 o'clock.
So that's Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So without further ado, I'm going to start. My first title that I will be talking about today, unfortunately, it's not on the table. It's still on reserve or it's on order. So I don't have it yet. Is called The Memory Dress by J. Fear. The Memory Dress is a very glamorous novel. Its opening scene takes place in Christie's auction house in New York in 1997 during the sale of Princess Diana's dresses. 80 dresses were listed to sell that evening, but only 79 did. One of them is missing, and it is what happened to that missing dress that is the central mystery of this novel, and the love story that unfolds over 30 years across its pages. The novel moves back and forth between the 80s and 90s and present day. The present timeline involves an elderly woman called Meredith, who seems to be forgetting things, including where her husband is, and that she has this relationship with her neighbor, Jane. So Jane realizes that something is going on, and she wants to help her. The story is also about Meredith's past, in the 80s and 90s when she was younger and she was a seamstress, and the dresses she created, including at least one for Princess Diana. By the end of the book, you will have had a tour through some of the most famous dresses in Diana's wardrobe. The author did a lot of research retracing where some of these incredible gowns were worn in order to write the story. The Memory Dress is a sweet but heartbreaking read and a look about how dementia robs a person of their life, and one you will not want to put down as you follow Madeline and Jane as Jane tries to unravel Madeline's life. Historical fiction fans of Princess Diana, and fans of fashion, as well as those who enjoy some twists and turns in their character's life, will enjoy this book. A serious subject served up in a sweetly quirky way, just my cup of English tea. The next book up is this one right here, The House on Biscayne Bay by Chanel Clayton. This book was named an anticipated read of 2024 by Entertainment Weekly and a best historical fiction novel of 2024 by Book Club. If you don't know, Chanel Clayton is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of Next Year in Havana, When We Left Cuba, The Last Train to Key West, The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba, and Cuban Eras. If you have not read any of these, I highly encourage you to pick some of them up. They are made for an excellent read that start in order. Yeah, because they pretty much feature one family over generations, but they read very quickly. They very, very interesting author. In her latest work, Chanel Clayton tackles the Gothic theme by centering on a dual timeline story around Marbricia, which is a glamorous mansion built in Miami, Florida during the Great War. The over-the-top mansion is a gift that Robert Burns surprises his wife with for her birthday, but during the inaugural party to celebrate the estate's completion, tragedy strikes and their lives are changed forever. More than 20 years later, Carmen Acosta has no place to go after a tragic accident, so she moves to Marbricia, and the mansion is currently home to her sister Caroline and her rich husband Asher Wyatt. Prior to her arrival, though, strange things were already happening at the mansion, but things escalate soon after, to the point where Carmen's life is, of course, in danger. Is Marbricia cursed and haunted like people believe it is, or are there strange events the result of something more sinister? The story features heavily on place and is woven with chilling suspense. There were some glamorous moments detailing the Florida coast in the 20s and the 40s, and you can sometimes actually see and smell this grand old house on Biscayne Bay. You certainly do get creepiness, or the sense of creepiness of this overgrown maze. This is a deliciously dark tale about loyalty, desire, lies, and murder with all the creepy feels of a Southern Gothic thriller. A little bit on the lighter side, of course, but maybe every once in a while you want something that's a bit lighter. Yes.
So this one won't be part of the series?
No,
It's just standalone?
completely different. Yeah, Gothic. It's not overtly dark though. When I say Gothic theme, it's not like ooh, it's too much for me. Yeah, but very much like the other books that she wrote. Yeah. That was this. Yeah. My next title up is The Paris Understudy, and forgive me, I'm going to royally pronounce her name incorrectly. She's called, I think, Oriel Thiel. Yeah. And this book, unlike Biscayne Bay, is a little bit on the heavier side. It is a September noteworthy book by the Washington Post. This powerful debut novel brings to life hard choices Parisian made or failed to make during Nazi occupation. The book is written in the tradition of Pam Jenoff and Fiona Davis. The Paris Understudy is an enticing tale set in France during World War II that takes you into the life of two rival soprano opera singers, the esteemed Madeleine Moreau and the up-and-coming Yvonne Chevalier, as they both veer down different paths to survive the Nazi occupation in Paris. Madeleine is the long-standing soprano star of the Paris opera scene, and Yvonne is her up-and-coming aspiring understudy. After initially agreeing to perform in Germany in 1939, Madeleine soon changes her mind after she learns that top Nazi leaders will be in attendance. So she bails on the performance, leaving Yvonne to do the performance. It's a massive success and reported in all the media. Unfortunately for Yvonne, when she goes home to France, she's ostracized by her country, and then the rest of the book sort of follows them as they try to make their way under Nazi occupation and how each of them veer down different paths. There are a few other stories going on into the main storyline between the two female characters, but for such a tiny book, I don't want to give away those stories because they don't take away from the story. You won't want to read it for yourself. What I liked about this book was that it shows both how people can be a victim of their circumstance, but only to a certain extent. The author's delivery allows readers to imagine themselves in their position, but having little choice but to make certain decisions that they've made. The author challenges readers to question the sacrifices they would make for their career, art, families, and morals. Fans of this author will know that one of the novel's standout features is the vivid depiction of Paris. The author brings to life the city through rich descriptions of the cafe, the streets, and certain landmarks. It does create a palpable sense of atmosphere that transforms readers into the heart of Paris. So the setting serves not only as a backdrop, but also as a character in its own right, enhancing the story with its beauty and allure. Be sure to read the author's note at the back. I know a lot of us like to avoid that, but it actually answers a lot of questions about how the author put together the story, came up with the idea. The Paris Understudy is a nod to the arts and a stark depiction of the choices we make to survive. It is for fans of Kate Quinn and Kristen Carmel. The next title I have for you is Mademoiselle Aoife by Emily Renien. It is a captivating tale of love and ambition in Paris and is a perfect fall read for 2024. This captivating historical novel is set in 19th century Paris and tells the story of Claire Eiffel, a woman who played a significant role in maintaining her family's legacy and their iconic contributions to the city of Paris. Claire is the oldest daughter of acclaimed architect Gustave Eiffel, and at the age of 14, when her mother dies, she becomes the mother of the house, but she's also her father's most trusted confidant in his construction business. I was fully immersed in their world. A booming Paris in the late 19th century, the relationship between Claire and her father is captivating. She's a strong, smart woman, and her father trusts her in both business and personal matters. It is in this way she's given a voice that most women at the time are not given. Fans of this author know that she loves to include baking and food in her books, and in this one, you will not be disappointed either. Included are descriptions of stunning venues in France and Portugal, where feasts and celebrations, including luscious dinners starring bouche Noël and croquembouche, decorate the pages. Mademoiselle Eiffel and the early life of Claire take place during La Belle Époque, the beautiful era, which comes to an end in 1914 at the onset of World War I. The author liberally splashes details across the pages that effectively bring the Parisian Gilded Age to life. This story is overall an exploration of strength, resilience, and power of self-determination. Claire's journey is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome adversity and attempt to chart one's own course in life. As one reviewer online said about this book, comme le tour Eiffel, c'est magnifique. So that's not a recommendation to pick up this book, I don't know what it is. My last title is this one right here, The Seventh Veil of Salome by Silvia Morano Garcia, and it is a Good Morning America book club pick. This is a sumptuous historical epic from the New York Times bestselling author of Mexican Gothic, which Maria is quite familiar with because she represented it on our panel of Canada Reads. Yeah, so. It is about a young woman who wins the role of a lifetime in a film about a legendary heroine, but the real drama is behind the scenes, of course. This book is a brilliant blend of women's fiction and historical fiction, offering a dual timeline that portrays 1950s Hollywood studio scandals and biblical court intrigue. I guess I did say biblical court, so it's really historical. The author's remarkable research skills shine through, providing enlightening information about that era and offering insights into the early mechanisms of La La Land. The incorporation of film noir and thriller elements keep you on your toes, with a forewarning that something tragic will unfold at the end to parallel Salome's shocking story. Morano Garcia's novel is told from a variety of perspectives, and she captures each voice perfectly, with dialogue that's artfully and subtly reminiscent of the Golden Age movies. She also proves to be an expert at building suspense. For example, she telegraphs that Vera and Nancy's rivalry will end explosively, but still manages to end the novel with a brilliant surprise. The author proved with her previous books like American Gothic in 2020 and Velvet Was the Night in 2021 that she's a master storyteller who can move among genres with ease, so it's no surprise that this venture into historical fiction is intelligent, exciting, and beautifully written. So
Is it written in English or?
It's in English.
Can you imagine her reading it? It's
No, but
Oh.
translated.
No, I don't think so. I believe she writes in English. I believe she writes in English.
The other one I thought I had here was translated.
I'll check that for you. What I was thinking at this point, instead of doing my coming soon titles, is we can maybe do all our titles and do our coming soon titles at the end. Yes. Yeah? Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over to Katie.
Hello, everybody. Jennifer sort of took the cake with all of the historical fiction books, so I'm not doing any of those. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I have 4 books chosen to talk about. The first 2 books are not entirely lumped together, but I do want to talk about them a little bit in tandem. I was on a little bit of a kick for reading middle-aged white woman fiction. I wonder why. So these first 2 books fall kind of in that category, both contemporary fiction. The first book is called The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. The second book is called Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. I don't have the real books. I have, because they're all on my lists as well. But I do have pictures thanks to Maria's brilliance of doing that herself and then stealing that idea. Okay, so first of all, The Wedding People, stunning. The Wedding People was published in July of this year. It is Alison Esbach's 3rd novel, though it is the first one of hers that I'm reading. And the main character is called Phoebe Stone. She's about 40, and as the story opens, she arrives at this kind of fancy hotel in Newport, Rhode Island that she's always wanted to go to. She arrives wearing a fancy green dress, has no luggage, and it turns out that she is the only person at this hotel who is not part of Lila and Gary's wedding party. Through some sort of mistake in bookings, the entire hotel was supposed to be booked out for Lila and Gary's wedding party. Now, I'm not going to tell you why she's there. I'm not going to tell you much about her story actually at all, because I feel like every element that follows sort of gives things away, which is one of my huge downsides when I do book reviews, because I don't want to tell anybody anything about the book. But I will say that it has, it's a very interesting and real, it felt very real and multifaceted. So the character development is amazing. After I read this and found out that she'd written other novels, I have put those books on my list of to reads, although as you can imagine, my list of to reads is very, very long. So I'm hoping that I get to them before I die. But it is a story of, it takes place within a period of just a few days, and it has a lot of the history between what happens with Phoebe is that she's an adjunct literature professor, and her marriage has just imploded, and some other things have happened as well. She's at a bit of a crossroads. That's what I'm saying, midlife crisis kind of books. I've been on a bit of a kick. And it's a little bit about how she deals with it. It's also a little bit about how different friendships can come about in the most unexpected places. But one of the things that Allison asked, if you like good solid character development of people who have definitely things that they have done wrong, things that they have done right, but not unapologetically so. It's just that's part of life. And I find that not often is it portrayed so well. It's portrayed very, very well in this book. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Claire Lombardo's book, Same as It Ever Was. Again, midlife crisis fiction. It was published in June of this year. It's her second book that I have read. The last book was called The Most Fun We Ever Had, which some of you may have read. It had been on my to-read list for a long time, and then eventually I got a little bit of a kick to read it. And as soon as it did, I found out she was coming out with a new book this year. I was one of the first to read this one. Again, amazing character development. So whereas both of her books have, I would qualify them as being family stories, but her last book was more multi-perspective. This one is told primarily from the main character, who's called Julia Ames. She is 57 at the onset of the book. She has she has two children, one who is about to graduate high school and go on to college, and another one who is in graduate school, and she's been married for a long time. The story opens in a very kind of typical, almost mundane situation of Julia heading to a grocery store that is not her usual grocery store to get something for a gathering, like a little bit of something. She just comes across as your typical woman living in the suburbs, getting stuff ready for an evening event. And while she's at this grocery store, she runs into someone, she sees someone from her past, and it shocks her, and it throws her completely off kilter. And that is the opening into the story that then moves us a little bit between the present and the past. When Julia first met her husband, the early days of her marriage, also a little bit about her childhood. The picture that is painted of Julia, a very, very imperfect woman for sure, is one thing, and the way that her marriage also is described it's very interesting to me, because one of the criticisms that I often have in ways that relationships are portrayed, especially long-term relationships are portrayed in literature anyway, often is that there's, the story always gets moved along because of a lack of communication. Like, if only they spoke to each other, then this wouldn't have happened, and then it doesn't actually the stories never actually touch on the roots behind, like, even when you talk about things, there's still more to delve into. There's still more to uncover. And this was one of the beauties that I found with Same as It Ever Was. Again, a very imperfect character, but really interesting in the ways that we all in life, I think, we all make mistakes in life, that's how we learn, but then also how we move forward with those mistakes. Some people will just kind of wallpaper over and continue on and pretend that they never happened. Other people try to learn from, do things differently, which is what she's doing with both reflections from her childhood and from previous relationships, and excellent read. The third book I'm going to talk about may not be everyone's cup of tea. However, I have to say, oftentimes for this kind of event, we have books that we think that we're going to talk about, and then we read them and it's like, I can't really put my put both feet in behind it. And with this one, I had like, every single book was just like, I just got on this kick. I'm sure you guys have all been on those kicks before too, where you just have like amazing book after amazing book after amazing book. So often it's the opposite kick where you're like, that was okay. But I'm very happy with all of my picks. So this this book is called The Will of the Many. It's by James Islington. He's Australian, and it's a fantasy book. Now, I know that fantasy, again, is not everyone's cup of tea. For those of you who are somewhat interested in it, I will tell you that it does a really interesting job of incorporating elements that you might be familiar with from other series, science fiction and fantasy series, like the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, the Game of Thrones series by George R.R. Martin, the Ready Player One series, and the Brew Cormoran series by Seth Dixon. This is the first book of the series, so the next book will not be out until next year, at some point in the summer. It is a fantasy book that follows a character called Vis, and Vis is, we learn fairly early on, actually, that's not his real name. He is a displaced prince from a country that was annexed by what is known as the Hierarchy. And he is in his late teens, early 20s, and he is looking for a way to basically topple this unfair kind of government that takes advantage of the lower classes through various machinations. I won't go on about it too much because there are a lot of little sub-storylines, and also I recognize my audience. And so instead, I will move to my last book, which is not a newer book, but it was so good that I had to talk about it. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So this one came out in 2022. It co-won the Pulitzer in 2023 for fiction, and she just did such an amazing job. For those of you who haven't read it, it's Demon Copperhead, as the name may suggest, it's built a little bit on the structure of Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. Except whereas David Copperfield was set in England many moons ago, Demon Copperhead is set in the Appalachians in the late 90s and deals with the opioid crisis. Now, when I say that it's built on the structure of David Copperfield, I really mean it's like she hung her whole story on the structure of David Copperfield. The characters from Demon Copperhead and Demon Copperfield, did I say David Copperfield and Demon Copperhead? They really mirror each other almost entirely, and even the action, even though they're dealing with such different subject matter like specifics, deals with the very broad strokes in almost a mirrored way. It was so interesting to see how she could do that, and it was also very, very impressive to me that it would have been an easy thing to do it and lose, obviously, to make it seem like a bit of an imitation, or that so much of it was just being entered in, like storylines being entered in only to mimic things from David Copperfield. Not Copperhead. But it really is its own story. If you haven't read David Copperfield in a long time, you won't be missing anything. It's just really kind of cool for those literary nerds who have read and remember the storyline of it as well, to see how closely the stories were followed, and still with such amazing success. Thank you very much. And then I am moving it to Maria Art.
You don't get a last.
Yeah, so there are two Marias.
Jen gets one. Thank you, Katie, for doing the fantasy. I have heard great things about The Will of the Many. It's on my list. And also for, pushing the boundary of introducing a fantasy. So I'm just gonna start with the fantasy that I have because we'll just get that out of the way because I'm hopeful. Okay, so the one I'm gonna start with is Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry. It's right in the middle. Ignore the cover. Don't let the cover fool you. So this is a prequel to another book that was really, really popular. It's called Legends and Lattes. But this one does a very good job of standing alone. I read both. It is the story of a young woman who's trapped in a coastal town. She happens to be an orc, but we'll ignore that part. It's not important to the book, really. So this is a genre, an orc. She's green.
Like Shrek.
Yeah, but so this is a genre of fantasy called low fantasy, or as opposed to epic fantasy, they're calling it cozy fantasy. And this one is about a woman trapped in a town who is trying to help a little mouse who runs a bookshop to make her bookshop work. That is the story, that is the whole book. It's about a bakery next door. So they talk about baked bread and coffee and all of those delectable things and the smell of the ocean, but they also talk about what it takes to make a bookstore work, which as a book lover, it goes very well for me. The fantasy element is almost irrelevant to the book, which I found very funny, but I almost forget as I read it that they are supposed to be these mythical creatures, because it's mostly about being frustrated at your customers and the book's not coming in on time, and how the sign looks out of date and that's why nobody wants to buy the book, so they fix the sign, and it's extremely cozy, very low stakes. In the fall, such a delight to sit down with your coffee and read, especially when it's dark at 4:30. It really helps. It really feels like a fire is burning and you want to read next to it. And since then I've picked up everything that Travis Baldry has created. I don't know why he makes all of his characters fantasy, because none of the plot has anything to do with it. But it doesn't matter. Read it. Great one. Also, the following book after that, Legends and Lattes, very good. I'm pretty sure Bookshops and Bone Dust is actually available because people tend to be afraid of the cover. I'm sorry, the marketing team didn't do it, but the book is so good. So I'm gonna move past that. I'm gonna go to the one next to it, the Full Moon Coffee Shop. So that one is on the right of Bookshops and Bone Dust. It is by Mai Mochizuki and it's translated by Jesse Kirkwood from the original Japanese. So I picked it up because it was on all of the lists of top Japanese books, best in translation, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but again, it really surprised me by its cozy nature. It's very philosophical, it's kind of a little bit Le Petit Prince, a little bit The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, if you've read it. So there's a lot of philosophy. It kind of pushes you to consider things in life. It's very short. It's right in front of me. You can borrow it after. It's about 4 different characters who are at different crossroads in their lives. They're kind of interspersed. And as they're trying to figure out what to do, they find a pop-up coffee shop, and it only appears on the full moon, and there's no menu. They only serve you what they think will jar you into action in your life to make your life better. And it makes you wonder, what would I be eating at this cafe? The cafe is also run by cats, but ignore that part. But that again, the descriptions of the food, delicious. I Googled everything afterwards because it's all Japanese food. A lot of it I've never heard of. So I wanted to go see what it looks like, and it made me want to make some at home. Some of it, I don't even know where to get the ingredients, but everything, the book is delicious. It's like sitting down to have the best dessert. Okay, now to the books I think you'll actually read. Has anyone here read a Rainbow Rowell book before? No? Okay, so it's a romance. The book is called Slow Dance. I've actually read all of Rainbow Rowell's books since I was a teenager. She started off writing for teens, now she writes for adults. So this one, all of her books are set in Nebraska because she's from Nebraska. It's set in Omaha, so all the descriptions are very true to her location. And this one is also about a midlife crisis, Katie. So it's the story of a divorced single parent. Her name is Shiloh, and she runs her town's little theater program, and she lives with her mother. She has shared custody of her kids, Juniper and Gus, and she goes to a wedding. And it's a mutual friend's wedding with this man, this boy that she liked in high school, and his name is Carrie, and he's in the military. And Carrie is there, and Shiloh's there, and he asks her to dance. And then she needs to figure out what to do next. So they've always kind of had this flirtation, but nothing's ever come of it, and it's a story about second chances. I love Rainbow Rowell's writing. The banter is great, the dialogue is great. It's not tropey at all. It doesn't fall into those miscommunication tropes, but all of her characters are so deeply flawed and complicated and quirky. They struggle with the things that they struggle with. Shiloh is, she's a chubby 40-something living with her mother and her 2 kids. How do you find love from there, and how do you go back from the past? So you jump between the past and the future, and you also find out more about Carrie and his life in the military and why he went into the military. Very small town, very sweet, generational divides, family issues, financial strife. I find after Rainbow Rowell's books, I always come out feeling really good. I always feel like I've just sat down and talked to a friend for an extended period of time. So again, I guess I have a theme. This time of year, I like a low stakes book. This one you'll breeze through, and I think you'll really enjoy it, and then you might go back and read her other books. My last one is Capital of Dreams by Heather O'Neill. Has anyone read a Heather O'Neill? Which one did you read? So she has a few. The first one that I read by her was Lullabies for Little Criminals back in undergrad. That's the one. So Heather O'Neill always writes, her main characters are always young women, they're always around 12, and she usually writes historical and specifically Lullabies for Little Criminals wasn't that. It was set in Montreal. But then she wrote one about the French Revolution, but set in Montreal. I actually got to interview her for the library last year, which was really fun, for When We Lost Our Heads. But this book, Capital of Dreams specifically, is a little bit of a deviation for her. She sets it in a fictional country called Elysia, and I think she specifically does this because you're not meant to really think about a specific country. And this country is at war, and it's called Capital of Dreams because the capital is being invaded by the enemy. Again, not stated who the enemy is. And the way Heather O'Neill writes is very poetic, very prosaic, beautiful, and the image that you start with, and the image that you spend a lot of the time, is a young girl standing on the back of a truck in a little gray button-up coat, and she's holding a goose. That is the image that you start with, and it's how she survives the war. There are some fantastical elements, some folky sort of elements, but the focus, it's like a feminist manifesto, there's a lot of political commentary, and there's just a lot to read out of it. It's about her relationship with her mother, who's a feminist icon and writes about feminism and women's place in the world. It challenges you. I find that Heather O'Neill never underestimates her audience. She knows that she has people reading that will gain a lot out of it. So I recommend giving it a shot. Ignore, there is a talking goose, I'll just throw it in there, but it doesn't, again, I think it's meant to give you an understanding of the girl's experience because it's a third person perspective. So I accepted it, but it also has a great twist at the end, which is fabulous in a book. When you read the whole thing,
there's a twist.
you have to go, and then you want to go back to the beginning of the book and read it and go, am I just bad at foreshadowing? Excellent read, highly recommend. And so that's all of the books I have for you, and that means I get to pass it off to Janine. I'm sorry, I forgot my nonfiction. Okay. Never Leave the Dogs Behind is a nonfiction book. I picked it up off the shelf without knowing anything about it, and it surprised me. So it's by Brianna Madia, who's apparently extremely famous on the internet, but I didn't know that. So her story is really controversial. So she became famous online with her husband, and then she became hated online because one of her dogs was hit by a car and her husband was the one driving the car. So the book picks up at the time where she divorces husband, takes 4 dogs into her big hippie van. The hippie van is called Bertha, and she moves to the middle of the desert by herself buys a plot of land and tries to go off grid and live out there by herself. It is fascinating. It's kind of like Into the Wild, but it's contemporary, and you can go and look her up on the internet and look at pictures of everything she describes, which is great. But it's her going into town and trying to get water, and her trying to get her trailer to work, and living out in the elements, and it's boiling hot. It is such an interesting read. I never would have known to pick it up because I don't hang out on the the hiking, trail blazing internet portion. Don't get out much. But apparently she's extremely famous and her writing is really good. It's autobiographical. It's like a study of a person in a crisis on the brink, but very realistic, very interesting. You fall in love with each dog. They have their own personality and temperament. Spoiler, the dog doesn't die, so that's nice. But do read the book. I think it's worth it. And she's written some other books. I haven't read those, but this one I really enjoyed, and I felt like I really got to know her. And now I get to pass it off to Janine.
Thank you. Thank you, me. So my first pick is called Shark Heart, a love story, and the author is Elaine Haybeck. So I first came across this book through my daughter, who called me up one day and said, please read this book because I desperately need somebody to talk about it with. So that was my introduction to this book. I had not heard of it before. It has to be the most original book that I've read this year. It's about love, it's about marriage, it's about transformation, and it's about letting go. This debut novel received widespread critical acclaim and a lot of popular attention due to its innovative approach to both grief and loss. So it's a kind of a sad book. Innovative approach, I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. The story revolves around Lewis, who is a high school drama teacher, who gets married to this young woman, Ren. They're married only a few months when he finds out, he goes to the doctor, and he finds out that he is starting to transform into a big white shark. White shark. So that is the premise of the book. So at first, Ren resists her husband's fate. She really tries to find ways that they're going to be all right, and maybe they can be together even after he changes. But then she starts to realize, as he starts becoming more shark-like, both in personality and physically, she starts to go back and remember things in her life. Things, her own childhood, growing up on a houseboat in Oklahoma, friendship that she had with a college roommate, and also her very, very unusual friendship with a woman who was pregnant, wait for it, with twin birds. Very strange book. So woven throughout is also her relationship with her mother, who becomes pregnant with Ren when she's only 15 through a very abusive relationship. So all of these stories collide, and poor Ren is forced to make this very, very difficult choice. And so what makes the novel so compelling is that on the surface, it's very, very strange. But what we find out is that these animal mutations function very, very much the way terminal illness functions. They're incurable, they're physically destructive, they're painful, and they're emotional and psychologically damaging. And obviously they cut human life short. So when you're reading the book, this is really what the book is about. It's dealing with terminal illness, with grief, with loss, and how you go on. How do you recover from that sort of loss? What's also interesting about the book is the way it's written. So it alternates between prose and script. So it's written in parts like a play, some of the chapters are labeled like C, X. So it's very, very, very original. So that's that for that. My next book is called The Lost Bookshop. This was a very, very popular book, and I'm sure many of you have already read it. It was followed up by a book this year called The Story Collector, which I didn't find quite as compelling, but this book I really, really loved, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. So it's very uplifting. It's by an Irish writer by the name of Evie Woods, who is also known as Evie Gone. It's very charming, it's very evocative, it blends things that I like, which is mystery, secrets, romance, and historical fiction, with a touch of magic. The book, even though one might see that one might think that it's just a very charming light read, it also tackles very serious issues such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and misogyny. The novel was shortlisted for all sorts of awards, and it became a bestseller on Amazon, and it sold over 1 million copies. It follows 3 individuals, Opaline, Martha, and Henry, who are all feeling a little bit lost in their own life. When a mysterious, vanishing bookshop appears, so the bookshop appears and then it vanishes, they are all drawn into its spell, and they kind of discover that their own stories of their own lives are just as extraordinary as the ones that are found in books. The book brings together 2 timelines, one in 1921 and another one in Dublin in present day, and it moves between London, France, and Ireland. So we start off in London, 1921, and Opaline Carlyle is a young woman with a passion for literature, and is very independent, and she escapes to France because her brother has arranged a marriage for her, which she does not want to do. While in Paris, she finds work at a real-life bookstore, the Shakespeare Company bookstore. So that is in the novel, which I really, really enjoyed. And she befriends the owner, Sylvia Beach, who's a real historical character who owns that bookstore. And she encounters such renowned writers such as James Joyce. But of course, her brother tracks her down. She flees to Dublin. And she takes over this quaint bookshop until she is discovered again. He puts her, he locks her up, he locks her away, and her experience in a sale asylum really is a true to life insane asylum. Really underscores this very sort of shameful part of Irish history. So meanwhile, we go to present day Dublin and we meet Martha and we meet Henry. Martha is escaping an abusive marriage and she finds solace in this house as a housekeeper. And she meets Henry, who is a PhD student, who is seeking this mysterious bookshop and a lost Emily Bronte manuscript. So connecting the 2 timelines is the missing bookshop, which should have been right next door to Madame Bowden's home on Piccadilly Lane, but it's not. It keeps coming and it keeps going, so it's this whole magical element. I really, really love this book, and if you haven't read it yet, I really encourage you to pick it up because it is charming, but it has all sorts of historical elements to it, and it has a nice, sweet, sort of satisfying ending. So it definitely is a must-read for readers who love books about books, which I am one of them, and really feel-good endings. My next book is The Amazing Grace Adams by Fran Littlewood. This is a story of motherhood. It's a story of language, identity, also grief, and the messiness of just everyday lives. It was named one of the Washington Post the 10 best feel-good books of 2023. The story centers around Grace Adams, and she's a mother on the brink. She's grappling with the chaos of her own life, both in her marriage as well as in her career. And it's told from 3 alternating time periods. The now part of the book is probably the most engrossing. Grace, she's a language teacher and a translator. She has decided that the only way to salvage her relationship with her daughter, who is just turning 16, is to personally deliver this very, very expensive birthday cake to her estranged husband's apartment, where Lottie has fled. And during the course of this one day, she navigates these crazy misadventures as she desperately tries to make it on time. But she is also kind of reflecting on how she got there, like all the different choices that she has made and the toll that they've taken on her sense of self. A bit of midlife crisis fiction. The second narrative strand, it covers just a few months before, and it unspools some of the events that have alienated mother and daughter. So it's a pretty cliche tale that teenage girl is lured into a very dangerous sexual relationship. She's bullied on social media, she doesn't talk to her mother, she cuts classes, she's failing school, all the kind of cliched events in a teenager's life. And Grace uses, because one has to always remember that Grace is a linguist, she's an expert in the language. She speaks many foreign languages, but she also understands the sort of the history, the etymology, I think it is, of various, I can't remember what the word is, something like that, etymology, sorry. But despite all these skills, she cannot communicate with her daughter. So this is a book about a communicator who cannot communicate. Then the book goes back a little bit further when she first meets her husband, who she is now estranged from. He too is a linguist, and they meet at a conference where I think it's she who wins this trip, this weekend away. They go away together, they have a relationship, and she doesn't speak to him for months until she finds out that she's pregnant. So then they get married. But like the relationship with her and her daughter, despite their expertise, they cannot communicate, they do not know how to have a conversation, and things are said, things are unsaid, things are not said, all the things that go into a relationship. So Littlewood's writing is very sharp, it's very insightful, it's very funny in parts, but it alternates these funny moments with profound emotional depth. It's really sometimes, particularly in the now part of the book, it's a comedy of errors where it's just slapstick comedy all the way, and you're laughing, but then things are unfolding where you are crying. So it's really got, it makes you sort of see how Grace got to be where she is in that moment, and it leaves you with a lot of empathy for her. The next book is A Beautiful Rival by Jill Paul. Jill Paul writes a lot of historical fiction about women in history. I haven't read anything by her except this is the one book that I picked up. And I truly found it engrossing and exceptionally captivating. What she does in this book is she reveals the unknown history of two very, very important women in cosmetics, Helena Rubinstein and Elizabeth Arden. And apparently their rivalry went on for decades, and it was infamous and it damaging, is to say the least. It with broken marriages, personal tragedies, and a world that was changing. If you like Marie Benedict, Fiona Davis, Beatrice Williams, this is a book she writes in that kind of a vein. What I was particularly interested in was Elizabeth Arden has maybe all heard of her, you can still buy her cosmetics. She was born in Toronto, and she was born to an exceptionally poor circumstances, just outside of Toronto on a farm. Her parents died quite young, and she went off as a teenager to New York to find her way. So the book begins at the beginning of her career, right up to the end, but it parallels also Leda Rubinstein's life and work. Leda Rubinstein was born in Poland and ended up in New York City, and it's about these two women who really, really were competing for the luxury market in just after World War I. What also is interesting is that they developed creams, potions. You kind of think of all this anti-aging creams as something that one, that's a product that it's only sort of new to the cosmetics industry. But these two women each developed creams, particularly Elizabeth Arden, that are still available today. The famous 8-hour cream. You can still buy that on the market. This was a cream that was developed in the 1930s. And it was very, very successful, and apparently it actually worked. Elizabeth Arden, who owned a fleet of racehorses, used to put it on her horses' hooves. So I loved the book. I did not know anything about these two women, but it really speaks to two very, very ambitious women, really carving out a role for themselves in an industry that wasn't really dominated by women, and they became very, very wealthy and making products very well known. So if you like historical fiction, and if you like books about women characters or women in history, this I truly, truly recommend it. My next book is totally, totally different. It's called Suddenly by Isabelle Autissier, translated from the French. So this is a gripping story about survival, and it was published in 2023. And the author was the first woman to have sailed around the world in a solo competition. So she was a navigator until 1999 and is currently the president of the French chapter of the World Wildlife Fund. So this is a book that follows a young story from Paris, a young couple from Paris. Ludovic and his wife, they set out on an adventure of a lifetime. So they just got married and they want to do something before they settle down, so they decided to sail around the world, leave their apartment, leave their jobs in France. And they go to the tip of Cape Horn, and then they stop on this deserted island, an island which they were not supposed to be on because it's a refuge, and you are not allowed to stop, but they stop anyways. So nobody knows where they are. And a storm rushes in, and they are stranded. They are the only people on this island, and they have to survive. There's a research station which is there, which provides them with some refuge. But the two must really depend on each other for survival. And it's really about what happens when you have to do something like that and you don't always agree, and one partner becomes stronger than the next partner, and then what happens after It's really about what happens to you after. And I don't want to say too much about what the after is, but it's a real story of survival. So if you like stories like that, I encourage you to pick up this book. The final book that I wanted to highlight is called A Jewish Girl in Paris. Has anybody read this book before? I really love this book. It's by Melanie Levinson, also translated from the French. And it's the story of three women. The first woman we are introduced to is Jacobina. And she it's 1982, and she's in Montreal. And her father is dying, and she's visiting him in a hospital. And on his deathbed, he reveals this secret that she has a half-sister, and that he feels very guilty. He has never gone looking for her, but he had lost touch with her during the war, during the Holocaust. He is from Romania, and he had been living in Paris at the time. The story then moves to Judith, who is the half-sister who is living in Paris. And she's a part-time library worker. It's 1940, and all the different awful rules and regulations regarding French Jews are just starting to come into place. So she is starting to deal with that. She's living with her mother, but she meets a man by the name of Christian. He's the son of a very, very wealthy French banker, but who is also a German sympathizer. So that is the father. So then we are moving, and they fall in love, and they try to carve out this relationship during wartime Paris. So then we move to 2006. This is when the story gets really, really interesting, because we are introduced to Beatrice, who is from France and is living in Washington. She's living in Washington, D.C., and she's working for the World Bank. And she's very, very unhappy with her job. She's unhappy with her boss, who is also unhappy with her. She's unhappy in her private life. She has a very unsatisfactory relationship with a news kind of reporter, a journalist. And she then meets the now elderly Jacobina. So Jacobina, she goes into her home, and Jacobina is now impoverished. She's living alone, and she starts helping her out. And Jacobina tells her, I have one thing I promised my father, that I would look for my half-sister, and I didn't. And now I am getting older, and I'm really going to fulfill this wish. And Jacobina and Beatrice decides to help her. So she ends up at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and she meets Gregoire, another Frenchman, who helps guide her through the process of looking at old records. And through her research, she stumbles on the secret, a family secret, but she also discovers what happened to Judith. So the book is based on the author's own family history, and Judith's part of the story is adapted from the diaries of a relative. It's a truly amazing book, and very uplifting in the end. Some of the things, of course, that Judith went through are awful and harrowing, but the book ends on a very, very positive note for all of the characters. So I really recommend it. So, without further ado, I pass this on to Ray. Thank you.
Okay, hello. So I know we're running a little long, so I'm going to go quickly. My first book is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. I absolutely loved this book. It was so much fun to read, and I couldn't put it down. It's one of those quirky, offbeat romances that stand out in the genre, blending rom-com charm and a touch of magical realism. People are on a magical theme today. Kirsty Greenwood's inventive take on what happens after we die was brilliant and perfectly executed. This book had me laughing from start to finish. Delphi's journey to find both love and herself is filled with hilarious mishaps and some truly cringeworthy moments. The story moves quickly. Delphi has just 10 days to find her true love, or she'll be sent to Evermore, a place where souls go when they pass away. This ticking clock really kept the pace tight and engaging, with something exciting happening on every page. Delphi herself is such a relatable and endearing character. She's emotionally closed off after being bullied in school and having inattentive parents. As a result, she's afraid of getting hurt again and has basically stopped living her life. Watching her come out of her shell and learn to open up was such a heartwarming experience. Once Delphi learns she has 10 days to find her soulmate, she's thrown into all sorts of situations she never would have imagined. And along the way, she meets some lovely and slightly eccentric characters who all want to be her friend. I couldn't help but adore Delphi and her journey, and I loved every moment spent in her world. The other main character, Cooper, is Delphi's downstairs neighbor. The chemistry between them is instant, and the banter they share is electric. They don't exactly get along at first, so every interaction between them is full of sharp, snarky exchanges, my favorite kind. I was really drawn to Cooper. He's a bit of a mystery, and watching his layers slowly peel away was a joy. The romance in this book strikes the perfect balance of sweet and spicy. Though I'll keep details vague so I don't spoil anything, I'll just say that this book takes you on an unpredictable romantic adventure with all the right ingredients, a one-bed scenario, plenty of awkward and hilarious moments, and thankfully, no third act breakup. If you're in the mood for fun, fresh rom-com with a dash of magic, The Love of My Afterlife is definitely for you. It swept me off my feet and gave me all the feel-good romantic vibes.
That was a really nice applause.
Yeah, that was.
My second book is The Magical Meet Cute by Jean Meltzer. So I'm a fan of Jean Meltzer's books. She wrote The Matzo Ball, which was a Hanukkah romance. I get excited every time she's releasing something new. So this one has a slightly different vibe from her previous work, and I absolutely love it. The incorporation of magic realism adds a unique touch to the story, but it's not your typical magical realism. Meltzer's Jewish spin on it sets it apart, especially through the character of Faye, our heroine, who identifies as a Jewish. If you are unfamiliar with the term, which I was, a Jewish is a figure from the Jewish folklore who practices magic, incorporating Jewish symbols and beliefs. I found it fascinating to learn about this element of Jewish culture, and it really enriched the story. This book is an absolute gem. It blends charm, humor, drama, quirky situations, and romance in such a delightful way. There's so much heart in the story, and it's so unique that you can't help but be drawn in. Jean has a way of telling stories that's lighthearted and fun, often bringing a smile to my face, but she also addresses some heavier topics like anti-Semitism, intergenerational trauma, childhood abuse, and chronic pain. She handles these serious issues with sensitivity and care, balancing them perfectly without overwhelming the reader. If you enjoy a grumpy sunshine romance, you'll love the developing relationship between Faye and Greg. Faye's a bit prickly and standoffish. Much of this is due to her painful childhood marked by abuse and trauma. She's afraid of the world, but still has a heart of gold, and her internal character growth is beautiful to witness. Greg, on the other hand, is an absolute sweetheart. He's such a lovable cinnamon roll hero who warms your heart with his kindness. The mystery around his identity and whether he's a real man or a golem adds a layer of intrigue and keeps you guessing. The reveal of his true identity at the end was so satisfying. This is a clean romance, which means there's no explicit content, but the connection between Faye and Greg is incredibly sweet, heartfelt, and charming. While there's a certain chemistry and some subtle tension between them, the focus of the relationship is on the emotional bond they build. Their quiet, tender moments together where they truly get to know each other are some of the best parts of the story, even if Greg's past remains a bit of a mystery due to his amnesia. Magical Meet Cute is a deeply emotional and heartwarming story, and it's one I know I'll be coming back to again and again.
That's great.
So my next book was actually the first one I read, and it got me out of my reading slump. So I've been hearing a lot about Frida McFadden's psychological thrillers, so I decided to pick one up. And this is her latest book, The Boyfriend, which really pulled me in. And like I said, got me out of my reading slump. She delivers a fast-paced narrative with a complex, twist-laden plot that keeps you guessing. I thought I had figured out all the major twists, only to realize she was several steps ahead of me. The story kicks off with a prologue introducing Tom Brewer, a high schooler from upstate New York, who reveals he's been infatuated with Daisy since he first laid eyes on her at the age of 4. Now he feels an overwhelming urge not only to confess his love to her, but also to strangle her with his bare hands. The narrative then shifts to present-day New York City, where Sydney Shaw, in her early 30s, is still searching for the right partner through the dating app Cinch. Her latest date with Kevin quickly turns disastrous. He's rude, inconsiderate, and makes her uncomfortable by coming on too strong. When she tries to evade him by lying about where she lives, he becomes violent, shoving her into a trash bin. Sydney, who suffers from a bleeding disorder, starts bleeding heavily from her head. A man intervenes and stops Kevin, claiming to be a doctor, and helps Sydney home, though she never learns his name. Her two best friends, Bonnie and Gretchen, are her support system. But tragedy strikes when they discover Bonnie's murdered body in her apartment. It turns out that the lead detective on the case is Sydney's ex, Jake. After the initial awkwardness, Sydney begins assisting him, but it becomes clear that the investigation isn't straightforward. Bonnie's boyfriend is nowhere to be found, and all his messages came from a burner phone. Meanwhile, Sydney is still being stalked by Kevin, and her dating life continues to be filled with strange encounters. After a disastrous date with Travis, she faints when she suffers a bloody nose. He faints when she suffers a bloody nose. Sydney runs into the mysterious man who saved her from Kevin. His name is Tom Brown. At this point, you may think you have the story figured out, but trust me, you don't. The chapters set in the past with Tom Brewer reveal disturbing events involving murder, missing girls, and a bizarre friend with a creepy fascination for bugs. I won't give away any more, but every detail in this novel plays a critical role in the unfolding mystery. As Sydney gets closer to Tom, she begins to notice troubling inconsistencies, including the fact that his last name isn't Brown after all. It's Brewer. But don't jump to conclusions yet. The twists and turns are far from over. The Boyfriend is yet another thrilling success for Frida McFadden. If you have enjoyed her other books, then I believe you will enjoy this one as well. If you're looking for your first McFadden book, like me, then definitely give The Boyfriend a try. Okay, so my last book is called The Society of Lies by Lauren Lynn Brown, another thriller. So Lauren Lynn Brown's debut novel, Society of Lies, is a gripping thriller that delves into the hidden world of the elite college culture, exploring themes of privilege, secrecy, and the lengths people will go to fit in. Set at Princeton University and its exclusive eating clubs, the story follows Maya, a woman of color who returns to her alma mater for her 10-year reunion and her younger sister Naomi's graduation. What starts as a celebration quickly turns to tragedy when Maya learns that Naomi has just died days before her graduation. While the police call it an accident, Maya suspects foul play and sets out to uncover the truth behind her sister's sudden death. The novel is written across 3 timelines: the present, as Maya investigates Naomi's death, and 2 flashbacks that recount the sister's time at Princeton, particularly the involvement in the fictional Sterling Club and its secret society. This layered storytelling builds suspense, gradually revealing the sisters' shared past. The relationship between Maya and Naomi is the emotional heart of the story. Brown explores the complexities of sisterhood, showing both their close bond and the tensions that arise from their different experiences at Princeton. Maya's guilt over her sister's death drives much of the plot, adding emotional depth to the mystery. As Maya digs into Naomi's death, she is forced to confront her own past at Princeton, where she faced pressures related to identity and belonging. The mystery is well crafted with a mix of clues and red herrings that will keep you guessing. As Maya uncovers the secrets of the Sterling Club, the truth behind the society in Naomi's death comes to light in a surprising and satisfying conclusion. The novel also explores moral ambiguity, posing difficult questions about loyalty, ambition, and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. Beyond its thrilling plot, Society of Lies also examines race, class, and privilege in Ivy League institutions. The setting is vividly described with Princeton's Gothic architecture and changing seasons adding to the novel's mysterious atmosphere. As a debut, Society of Lies shows Brown's promise as a writer. While the pacing slows in the middle of the book, the overall story remains engaging. I found the multiple timelines a bit confusing at first, but the story progresses, the connections between them become clearer and more rewarding. Society of Lies is more than just a thriller, it's a thoughtful exploration of sisterhood, identity, and the darker side of ambition. With its well-developed characters, intricate plot, and timely themes, Lauren Lynn Brown has delivered a strong debut that will appeal to fans of dark academia and anyone interested in the complexities of race and privilege in its environments. I will be eager to see what she writes next. And that's my 3 books very quickly. 4 books.
So now we're going to turn over to your second handout. It's the handout of all the coming soon titles. We don't have these yet, but they're going to be released in the next couple of months or the next year. So look for them in the catalog. I'm going to start with The Greatest Lie of All by Gillian Cantor. This one is actually coming in December. A glamorous romance novelist and an aspiring starlet share an unexpected secret in this addictive story about love, ambition, and how far we're willing to go to protect our hearts. It has, for those of you who read this book, it has very similar vibes to the book The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Reid. That was a very popular book for a long time. So if you like that book, you should like this one. You'll enjoy probably unraveling all the lies and secrets in this book, especially, of course, the latest one. Next was The French Winemaker's Daughter by Loretta Ellsworth. This is also coming in December. It's set during World War II. It's an unforgettable historical novel about love, war, family, and the loyalty told in the voices of 2 women generations apart who find themselves connected by a mysterious and valuable bottle of wine sold by the ancients. All things wine. I would definitely recommend this book for any historical fiction fans, especially if you liked The Book Thief, which it gives off very similar vibes to that book. And just a word about this one, unlike perhaps The Paris Understudy, as far as a book set in World War II goes, it is not nearly as dark and heavy as they usually are. So it could be a good book for someone who wants to tiptoe into the genre of World War II fiction. Next up, and I'm very excited for this one, it's coming in January, it's The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis. The novel centers on the Met Gala, stolen art, tragedy 4 decades earlier, travel, an Egyptian curse. It's just my type of book. I love reading in general about Egypt, Cairo, mysteries, curses, and it seems that Fiona Davis has delivered another masterpiece. So I can't wait to get my hands on this one. And for those of you who love to poo-poo my reading choices on this panel every time because they all present with me every year after year, it's always historical fiction. So my next 2 selections are for those of you who complain. They are contemporary fiction. You'll be happy to know. The 4th one is Eddie Winston is Looking for Love. This is coming at the end of December. It's by Marion Cronin, and the author of the beloved international hit, The 100 Years of Lenny and Margaret. Returns with a funny, uplifting story about the power of friendship and finding love in unexpected places. Supposedly, Eddie Winston is a warm hug in a book, and you won't want to stop during the final quarter as you'll be heavily invested in Eddie and Bella's stories. Lastly, The Favorites by Lynn Fargo. This is coming supposedly January 14th. Scandalous, stimulating, thrilling, addictive. This book is pure definition of obsession. Apparently, you don't want it to end and you just want to spend more time with the 2 main characters, Kate and Heath, on their wild ride. This is an epic sports romance with a heart-pounding, exciting, hyperventilating, and also very realistic approach to the ice dance world. It delves into how far contenders will go to win an Olympic medal. Inspired by the powerful love and hate that fuel Emily Bronte's classic Wuthering Heights, The Favorites is an exhilarating dance between passion, ambition, and what it truly means to win.
sounds so spicy. Wuthering Heights is pretty spicy. It is, you're laughing, but it is, it's one of my favorite books. I will just add, with the Eddie Winston is looking for love, so part of the storyline, if you're interested as well, it's supposed to be, Eddie Winston is like this octogenarian who's never been kissed, and then he meets him.
Give away too much of the story.
How is that giving away? It hasn't even come out, we haven't read it. And then it's someone who's trying to help him give his first kiss, which sounds very sweet. And The 100 Years of Glennie and Margot, if you didn't read it, is a lovely book as well. Here you'll see that I only have 2 picks listed, and I don't know if this became apparent or this has become apparent already, but obviously I am slightly less structurally prepared than everyone else that I'm with. So what I'm gonna say is I'm actually gonna start with 2 books that are not here. We didn't include them because there aren't there's no cover art for them, because they have theoretical release dates, but I'm still really excited about them. So they're both second books. One of them is the second book of the Hierarchy series of the Will of the Many that I just spoke about. There's another one that's coming out, it's supposed to come out this coming summer, called The Strength of the Few. And the other book is also a second book of something that I did not even realize was a series. And when I found out that it was coming out, I got very excited, very, very excited. And the release date they gave was October 2024. Even more excited. And then I looked deeper into the record, and the digital copy doesn't seem to be available until August 2025. Apparently, it's had a couple of different release dates, so I don't know when it's actually going to come out, but it is called Villain, and it is by Natalie Zena Walscott. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's a Canadian author, and she wrote the book Hench, which was on the Canada Reads list a few years ago, told from the perspective of a villain, we'll say, or she's villain adjacent, really, in Hench. So it's in this world where it's basically our world, but the superheroes and the villains, it's sort of run more like corporations. Anyway, it was fantastic, very, very funny, very, very enjoyable. So I'm looking forward to the second book coming out. The ones that you can actually see that I have here, I don't think any of my upcoming excitements are midlife crisis fiction. So Tartufo, I remember choosing that one because it seems like it has a varied cast of very quirky, interesting characters, and I do tend towards somewhat weird books. And Kevin Wilson, if you're not familiar with him, he also wrote The Family Fang, and he also writes very weird books. So Run for the Hills is kind of guaranteed to be a little bit odd, literary, interesting, funny, and that's what I'm excited about.
Okay, so the first one on my list is another Japanese translation, another one about cats. We'll prescribe you a cat by Sue Ishida. So tucked away on the 5th floor of an old building at the end of a narrow alley in Kyoto, the Kokoro Clinic for the Soul can be found only by people who are struggling in their lives and who genuinely need help. The mysterious clinic offers a unique treatment to those who find their way there. It prescribes cats as a medication. Patients are often puzzled by this unconventional prescription, not good for those of you with allergies. But they take their cat for the recommended duration and they witness profound transformation in their lives. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds completely up my alley based on what you've heard so far, I'm sure. It also won the 2023 Kyoto Book Prize, which is pretty cool. My second one is The Village Library Demon Hunting Society by C.M. Wagner. It's about a librarian, because librarians like reading about librarians, with a knack for solving murders, and she realized there's something decidedly supernatural afoot, and it's a cozy fantasy mystery. Librarian Sherry Pinkwhistle, that's a Northern name, keeps finding bodies and solving mysteries, but she's concerned by just how many killers she's had to track down in her quaint village. I think that sounds fabulous. The third one, I have a biography, a memoir actually, from Kelly Bishop, who I love. I love her from the Gilmore Girls, but most people love her either from A Chorus Line or Dirty Dancing. She was the mother in Dirty Dancing. I love Kelly Bishop. I think she's so witty, and I can't wait to read her insights. Sometimes memoirs, especially from celebrities, can be so, I guess, like, you can tell it's a template and you've got an editor and you have somebody who's really doing the work for them. I trust Kelly Bishop. She's a smart lady, and I trust she's going to give me a smart book. So I'm excited for that. And my last one is a sequel. So the first book is called The House on the Cerulean Sea. It's by T.J. Klune. The first book is about a social worker who goes out to a tiny island on the Cerulean Sea, and there is an orphanage for special children that are deemed dangerous or different in some way. And so this man is in his 50s, he's not too happy with his life, he's not happy about the assignment, and he gets there and he discovers a lot of interesting magical situations. I'll give you an example. One of the children's name is Lucifer, and he is the son of the devil. But they call him Lucy, so it's not too evil. And this is the sequel. It's called Somewhere Beyond the Sea. It's supposed to focus on the keeper of the orphanage. I'm really excited about it. I love T.J. Klune's writing style. It's a fantasy that makes you think about contemporary life, which I really enjoy. But you feel kind of safe in the writing. You know that it's not going to try to attack you or murder you or give you a scene you're not ready for. There's never anything graphic. You really feel secure throughout the reading experience. And sometimes I'm looking for that. That's me.
Okay, so most of my books have recently been released, so they are available. I'll start with There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Elif Shafak's writing is often described as beautifully lyrical, and she blends language with very rich descriptions. She's a writer of dual heritage. She's both British and she's Turkish, and she often explores the tensions that come from different cultures, of being amongst different cultures. I really enjoyed The Island of the Missing Trees, and so this is her newest book. It's set in London and in Cyprus, sorry, not London, not Cyprus, in London and in Turkey, and it is about a lost poem, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh, two rivers, the Tigris and the Thames, and one drop of water that connects all of these things. So it looks to be very intriguing. I just picked it up, so I'm really anxious to read it. And she really is one of the great writers, contemporary writers of our time. She's a wonderful writer, so if you haven't read anything by her, I really encourage you to do so. Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. Elizabeth Strout's writing has a unique way of reaching very deep into the human experience. Her newest book returns to the town of Crosby, Maine, and to her beloved cast of characters, Lucy Barton, Olive Kitteridge, and Bob Burgess, as they deal with a shocking crime in their midst. The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave. I loved The Last Thing He Told Him, and this was, I think, her first book, and I'm really looking forward to reading her newest book, The Night We Lost Him. This has Dave's signature blend of twisty mystery as well as family drama. And she has this incredible knack of building suspense while at the same time slowly revealing big family secrets. And her newest book is in that vein for sure. It's about a father who mysteriously dies and his children who are trying to prove foul play. And in the course of doing so, they uncover this life-changing big family secret. In Winter I Get Up at Night by Jane Urquhart. So this is Jane Urquhart's first book in almost 10 years. she's one of the great Canadian writers of our time. She wrote The Stone Carvers, which was a beautiful book, so I'm really, really looking forward to reading this. It's already, it's been longlisted for the 2024 Giller Prize. It's a Heather's pick. It's one of Indigo's most anticipated books, one of the CBC's Canadian fiction books to read in fall 2024. It's a profound, it's supposed to be a profound and moving novel about an unforgettable life. So looking forward to reading that. The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. So Foley is great at creating very suspenseful narratives that leave you on the edge of your seat. You are hooked from start to finish. I read the guest list and I've also read The Apartment, so if you're looking for some thing in that suspense thriller vein, this is definitely a great pick. Her books always revolve around mysteries, disappearances, and lots of twists, which make them incredibly engaging. The Midnight Feast is the same as all of her other books. It's suspense, it's very atmospheric, and it says to capture the tension and intrigue of a seemingly innocent event, a late night gathering at a remote country house. So she often does that sort of lock room mystery type of book, so I think this is no exception. There are two books on my list that I forgot to write anything about. So, Real Ones by Katharina Vermette. Katharina Vermette is one of my favorite authors. I don't actually remember what the book is about, but she is an Indigenous Canadian woman writer, and she is best known for her book, The Break, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. Oh, you read it? Or you know? Okay. Okay, so you can tell me what Real Ones is about, Katie.
It's, I believe, if my memory serves, it's about two sisters who find out that their mother was a pretendian. And then while they grow up, of course, and they are not, but like they have to then sort of figure out which parts of their culture is real and which is not. I think that in the wake of a lot of different news articles, this is I'm very much looking forward to reading it.
And then finally, there's Kate Quinn. I don't think really Kate Quinn needs very much of an introduction. The Bezaire Club, I believe, is her latest book, and I do not know what this one is about either. Any takers?
Is this where they're a club, they have a house, and there's work? Oh, I had it on my list, and I saw it on yours, I took it off.
Oh, I forget.
Librarians, we read so much, we get advanced copies, on this, little webinars, it's like,
Anyways,
Excuses.
everybody loves Kate. Everybody loves Kate Quinn, so I'm sure it's a fabulous read. It's a historical fiction, and it's usually about women.
So very briefly, my coming soon list involves 3 romances and mystery, no surprise there. So my first book is The Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. She's one of my favorite romance authors. She wrote The Love Hypothesis. This is going to be her newest one. It's a competitive diver and an ace swimmer jump into forbidden waters in this steamy romance. My second book is If You Need Me by Helena Hunting. She's a Toronto writer. And that's just a hockey romance. Gotta get some good hockey romances in her. My third book is called ASAP by Axie Ko. This is actually a young adult book. Lately I've been really enamored with Korean culture and Korean media. So this is a K-pop idol and 2 K-pop idols who fall in love. And she's laughing at me because she knows I'm a BTS fan, so this is about K-pop idols. And my last book is Now or Never, 31 on the Run by Janet Ivanovich. I don't think she needs any explanation. It's the 31st book in the series. And apparently Stephanie Plum has said yes to both Morelli and Ranger, so we're gonna see what she does. It's in the summary of the book, I'm not ruining anything. She said yes to both of them, so now I gotta find out who she's gonna marry. And that's my coming soon.
So, honestly, my final word.
So hopefully, those two handouts and all those books that we went over with you, you'll find something that'll be interesting and this fall and will keep you busy reading. Thank you to my fellow panelists for always agreeing to participate, and thank you to our audience.